twilight zone here.
Well, you know, I'm a little confused as to who did what to whom, but the reality is, Alex, you've earned your keep. You've done a brilliant job of keeping the alternative right on course. And this grew way, way before some of the pundits said. This really grew out of 9/11. And you were essential to this. And that's why I have to go back to that episode and the collusion that occurred, because in a way, Trump has opened up the door once again to the 9/11 crowd. What you're seeing here is 9/11 people on both sides of the aisle. You have Comey, he was involved as a junior individual in the Justice Department. You certainly have Mueller, who was very much involved in 9/11, you know, the classical white Anglo-Saxon Protestant who could do no evil. I do congratulate him on serving in the Vietnam War, but I do not congratulate him as a director of the FBI, because he tainted himself, he tainted the FBI, as did Comey and as did Freeze. So the FBI is a marked institution that really has very little value. We have the Secret Service. We have all kinds of other domestic entities. So one of the things that Trump did, unwittingly or wittingly, he was a Trojan horse. He opened up the door to every one of the people who worked with Bush Jr. And the tip of the arrow was Elliott Abrams, John Bolton. Then you get a whole bunch of people who worked for Ted Cruz, Kellyanne Conway, blah, blah, blah. And they all received money. The reality of this show, as I understand it, and as you have come forth without any explanations from the former extreme left, which has switched to the right, i.e. David Horowitz or the boys from Los Angeles, whom I know, you really were the speaker and the spearhead of what 9/11 is about. 9/11 has never been forgotten by your audience, and over 70% of the people now understand that everything that's being said by officials, including the President of the United States, with possible exception of Trump, is becoming a lie. And that's the problem that we're having in the system. New York Times, the Washington Post, they all have been co-opted through 9/11. They're co-opted now. What we're not talking about, and this is pretty much of a deep state diversion, which is what the intelligence system wants you and our people to do, is not to talk about the wars that have been going on in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa. I have repeatedly stated that under no condition has Trump the right to send our troops into combat. He has neither the legal right, nor does he have the judicial or the popular right to send men into war for reasons that we don't agree with. And what I'm trying to say again to you, Alex, and to our people, is we're wasting trillions of dollars on generals who were involved in 9/11. Mattis went out there in Iraq and he did whatever he did, which isn't all that impressive to me, but he garnered his own reputation on the basis of that. These boys are not modest, these generals, because they like to self-inflate. Same thing with McMaster. He turned out to be a disappointment, but again, he inflated his own accomplishments. What has not been inflated is the reality that we're going to lose men and women to wars that don't belong to our national security.
That's my next question. What do you make of U.S. forces striking yesterday, 18 miles in a 35-mile exclusion, no-go, no war zone, approaching a Shiite base, supposedly?
Let me tell you what I'm making of this. And I've said it to you before, but I don't expect you to kind of absorb it right away, not because you can't. I've said it repeatedly. If the CIA created another war, which they are doing in Syria, and I've had the good fortune or misfortune to have been interrogated by Bashar Assad's own people and security, and I was kept intact, and for 18 days I traveled around the country to report back to my intelligence individuals that this was not a regime you want to play with. And the reason I said that...
it's sunk in. I'm not dumb. You're saying they're dug in.
But I'm saying something else. What I'm saying is there should be no American soldiers on the ground. And I will tell you why. Hezbollah, which has been already recognized as a quasi-legitimate entity, as was Hamas and as was PLO. They are in the real estate business. They are incredible businessmen in Lebanon. But you do not mess with young men, 8,000 of whom have been in combat day in and day out for 7 years because you're only 10 minutes away from their house in Lebanon. In other words, you've got to look at these Hezbollah fighters as we did patriots. I'm not saying they're great people. I'm saying these are young men who are willing to fight and kill to make sure that we don't get into their territory. And Syria comes close to Lebanon. On top of that, we have never...
No, I mean, as a patriot, you're saying we shouldn't be there backing a bunch of jihadis to take over a country that didn't attack us.
Backing anybody. This is a war created by our CIA, our military...
To overthrow Assad, so we shouldn't be there, but the argument is get rid of Assad. So why are you saying I wouldn't get that?
No, I didn't say you wouldn't get that. I said from day one, we shouldn't have been Saddam Hussein, throw him out. We shouldn't have been taking Noriega.
Oh, you were saying in general people wouldn't get it.
That's correct, and nobody's saying anything about it. I don't hear one word about the fact that we are spending trillions of dollars.
No, I agree. We got to come back from break. I'm asking you then, why do you think this convoy got blown up 18 miles from some Shiite base?
Because the convoy was just a target of opportunity. And what I'm saying is that the Shiites basically are going to defeat us. I'm going to say it repeatedly. You have the revolutionary...
No, I understand. So we just blew up a convoy going up against the Shiites, or is that intel wrong?
The intel isn't relevant anymore. What I'm trying to say is...
I get it. It's all just a big...
One of the things he has to do is what I said a long time ago. Number one, he has no reason to have the press in the White House. He can do whatever he wants.
You've been saying that for a year before he even got elected, and now he's saying maybe I should kick him out.
Well, you know, Trump had very good instincts from day one, and he had to rely on a lot of people whom he couldn't trust. Many of them were Republicans who came out of the Heritage Foundation. He never really reached into our group, into the alternative media group. I mean, Breitbart was perhaps one of it, but Steve Bannon came in pretty late. And, you know...
And he's been isolated from the beginning.
Well, yes, but the reality is Trump has to wake up to realize that it was we, you, me, and a bunch of others who from very early on, we were looking for a candidate, and we chose him. Now, if he opens up the door, and I said it's a Trojan horse, and he picks Republicans who are in the Bush Jr. administration, he's self-destructing.
And he's starting to do it.
Well, the one thing I was against, and quite frankly, I was going to say it earlier, but I didn't have the time, and it was nothing to do with you, is I was going to write that Trump should not have gone on a foreign affairs trip. There's no reason for him to go to Italy or Belgium or Israel or Saudi Arabia now. It does nothing for him. If anything, it leaves it behind. The king is left, and you've got 4 or 5 generals sitting at home just waiting to see what would happen. During that period of 9 to 14 days in any other era, there would have been a de facto military coup. Now, I'm not saying there is one. I'm just saying historically that's what happens. At the same time, as much as he thinks he's in control from afar, he's not. He's not even...
No, I got it. He thinks he's changing the subject, but they've already launched this thing before he left.
Way before he left, and it's not coming just from the liberals or the Democrats.
So that's what you're saying. I had that feeling a few days ago. They're heating this up before he leaves to pull something while he's gone.
You hit it, Alex. And one of the reasons why I wanted to come on the show now was to tell him, but it's a little late, not to go overseas. That is a very bad decision. It's a very poor strategic choice. The Saudis don't need $110 billion worth of Lockheed Martin. Right now, what we need is a consolidation of power in the White House. Get rid of all the Republicans who came in through the Ryan factor.
By the way, even Rupert Murdoch has flipped to Trump, I guess feeling sorry for him, and told him that Sunday. Everybody's telling him, fire everybody, don't leave, but he still did it.
Well, I agree with Rupert. I mean, I don't know Rupert Murdoch. I knew Roger Ailes, and I've tracked Rupert Murdoch, and I have respect for his business acumen. But if you want to be in control, you know, trust is good. But as Dzerzhinsky, the father of the KGB or the NKVD, said, control is better. And one thing Trump is not doing, he's not in control. And that's one of the reasons why he feels very anxious. He's got his son-in-law, who really doesn't offer anything and is acting as an intercessor.
Very weak.
Very weak. He's got a daughter who, his lovely daughter, but very weak. You got Reince Priebus, very weak. You've got Spicer, very weak. Kellyanne Conway, very weak.
By the way, he's rejected all their Supreme Court people, all their new federal judges, their new FBI. Who should he appoint those positions, or is that putting the cart before the horse?
The Supreme Court and the FBI is secondary to the fact of, let's look at Nixon. Despite the fact that he had been ill and he was out of power and we had a soft coup, I have to commend Henry Kissinger for having created a group of us to maintain the stability at a time when we didn't have...
I tell you what, let's talk about what happened back then when that coup took place and what you did. Because it's true, people criticize me for saying Trump's good having Kissinger there. Kissinger, behind the scenes, actually wants to make a deal with Russia, doesn't want war with China. As bad as he's been in the past, he's nothing compared to current globalists. At least he knows the players. Let's talk about that and the way out for Trump and America straight ahead.
On the march.
No one can deny this country's in a crisis. No one can deny that special interests are arrogant and out of control. And I want to ask Dr. Steve Pieczenik, here in closing, if we look at where Trump is, we look at the attacks, we look at where the whole world's going. Hell, I'd ask you one question to stay over, and I forget what it was, but there's just so much to cover here. Well, what should people know about this historical time we're alive in?
Number one, Trump has to understand he has to get in control of the White House. Number one, he should fire everybody there. Number two, get rid of the newspaper. Number three, bring in Newt Gingrich, who understands how, I said Hollywood, but it's about the same. He understands the party. He understands what has to be done. He's effective. At the same time, bring in guys like myself and others who've we've chopped down agencies and we leave. We don't stay there. We don't get paid. We don't get honorariums. We're not part of the news. What I get called in for is to take down an institution, reorganize it, and it doesn't exist anymore. And that's what this country needs. If we don't do that, we're lost. I mean,
well, look at the arrogance of these bureaucracies. The question I had, I remember now, was Kissinger. Kissinger's done a lot of bad stuff, big globalist. But he even knows we don't want war with China or Russia. He's been advising Trump. We'll say, oh, my God, you're for Henry Kissinger now. No, I'm not for Henry Kissinger. But he's more of a realist than the current neocons that just want total war. So, I mean, what's the word on what Kissinger is advising Trump to do?
Well, I don't have a problem with it. I worked for Henry Kissinger. I had my differences, but one thing you got to say about Henry, number one, he was in counterintelligence. Number two, he served our military, unlike the neocons. Number three, he knows the world extremely well. Number four, he was exceedingly popular at a time when we needed a man who could take over for the fact that Nixon was ill. And actually, Kissinger's greatest contribution to our history is that during a time when we didn't have a president of the United States, he stood very tall and strong and made certain that the Chinese and the Russians couldn't take advantage of us. We don't have that opportunity right now. That's why I was glad to see Henry Kissinger counsel Trump, because despite all the other issues, and I was against it, I was against the war in Vietnam, but nevertheless I participated, he still was a brilliant strategic analyst, and he was very effective in implementing something for a brilliant president who was Nixon. And despite what happened to Nixon, you cannot take away the achievements that he accrued, and thanks to Frank Kissinger and his staff. He had one of the most brilliant staff I'd ever seen. Winston Lord in China, Chas Freeman, a whole bunch of guys who were never called back. And when you have somebody, they're still out there, the Foreign Service officers who served us exceedingly well, they're retired, but there's no reason not to go back to them. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about Frank Wisner, who's ambassador to Egypt, and we called him in when we needed him. Obama didn't know how to use them. A man like Chas Freeman, who came under the Bush Jr. administration, and the Jews, or Ginza, got rid of him because they didn't feel he was pro-Israel. That's nonsense. We've had a lot of talented people who are considered...
Sure, bottom line, and then I'm going to end this. We got our next guest here, Dr. Pieczenik, but everything you're saying is obviously historically important. Why are the elites so against Trump? That endears me to him, but I see the economy buoying under Trump. I see major newspapers mad that we're trying to prop Trump up, saying it's Jones's fault the stock market didn't plunge. And I'm like, it's cartoon. I would write that to discredit myself. They're openly trying to crash the stock market?
No, what's happening is they're intimidated by you. They're intimidated by what we say. They can't get a control on any of this that's occurring. This did not occur through the mainstream media, i.e. the mainstream media is no longer in existence. It is neither mainstream nor is it media.
It's a ghost.
Well, it's not only a ghost, it's a dead entity, and it's kind of cringing from the grave. It's billions of dollars went underneath. The Post, all the iconic papers have gone.
They're all propped up by drug dealers. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in that case, it's slim. That's the case. But it's Bezos in one case. It's another issue in another. But
well, that's a CIA contract. What a scandal. The Washington Post is paid for with a taxpayer contract?
That's correct. But the CIA underwrites a lot of other stuff. We don't want to get into that. I don't want to get caught in the CIA Machiavellian. What I want to say basically is, Alex, you have to continue on. We have what we have, and we basically, Trump has to listen. He's either in control or he's not. There will be no excuses. If he cannot garner control, namely get rid of everybody that he doesn't feel comfortable.
By the way, all the experts are telling him that. They're all saying get rid of everybody.
It doesn't take a psychiatrist to say, look, Trump, you came in on your instincts. You're going to come out on your instincts, or you're going to regret the fact that you didn't trust your instincts. But you shouldn't
come back with your shields or on it.
That's correct. He's going to lose it one way or the other. There are those of us who are willing to come in for nothing and just do what we have to do for the Republic and leave. Those are the ones who are loyal to him, not the ones who got millions of dollars from the Mercers or the super PACs, all that nonsense.
Yeah, there's those of us that aren't sociopaths that actually care about the idea versus a sociopath. This is incredible. All right, StevePieczenik.com. Thank you so much, Doc. Amazing.